Okay, so good afternoon, I'm Molly, and as Heather said, I'm from the Centre for Arts, Memory and Communities within the Faculty of Arts and Humanities. I actually come from a physiotherapy background, so more the healthcare professional side of things. But my research is looking at outdoor and nature-based practice with people who are living with dementia. So I'm just going to talk you through a bit of the background about my research, what I've done and some of the findings so far. So a bit of background then, dementia refers to a number of degenerative brain conditions. So you've probably heard of Alzheimer's disease, which is the most common, and it's characterised by memory loss and confusion, amongst other symptoms as well. It is currently incurable, so a lot of the treatment currently existing focuses on the management of symptoms rather than actually a cure, although there is a lot of research invested in finding a cure. And the prevalence of dementia is increasing both in the UK and globally. So in 2015, there was predicted that there are 850,000 people living with dementia. Obviously, this is people who have got a diagnosis, not reflective of those who haven't. And this is a figure which is set to exceed 2 million people by 2050. So we've got a massive health challenge on our hands. A lot of the people who are living with dementia are supported by informal and often unpaid caregivers, so namely family, partners, spouses. And we really need to look at how we can best support the care that is given outside of sort of structures of care homes and nursing homes. So my research focuses on enhancing quality of life and what can we be doing as researchers to ensure that this is our focus of our research and supporting people living with dementia. And one of the ways that that's been done is through engagement in meaningful activities. So people who are living with dementia quite often experience a loss of independence and therefore have to give up existing activities, hobbies and interests. So what can we do to make sure that these people who are living with the condition can still engage in these meaningful activities, and particularly looking around the community support and what is it within the community that we could offer. So my research is focused specifically on outdoor and nature-based activities. There's a wealth of research that goes back years to show that being engaged with natural environments and outdoor environments is incredibly beneficial for our own health and well-being. That's not just exclusive to people who are living with particular conditions. I'm sure you'll agree that you feel much better when you've got fresh air and been outside for a walk than sitting indoors. There's been specific benefits of engaging within activities in environments, so not just being in this outdoor space, but actually engaging within activities such as gardening or physical activities within these spaces. And some of the benefits have been specifically explored in groups of people who are living with dementia, and they show a positive effect on some of the more negative symptoms associated with the condition, and actually help structure some of the symptoms. So things like wandering, which are looked at quite negatively, actually we can provide quite a structured environment outdoors for somebody to engage in walking activity that's in a positive, got a positive effect on their well-being. I've looked specifically at community-based support. So what can community-based activities offer a group of people who are living with dementia? And I've looked at that through a number of different external organisations. So my overall aim of my project then was to investigate how outdoor, horticultural and nature-based activity can benefit people living with dementia and cognitive impairment. So that's an informal diagnosis of dementia where we've seen changes in somebody's cognitive ability that might precede to dementia, and also their caregivers. So what can these sorts of activities actually offer caregivers as well? Just to quickly, horticultural activity refers to the growing of fruits, vegetables and plants, and other activities such as cooking and craft activities as well. So I've split my PhD into 3 phases. So the first phase was an exploratory phase, so it involved a literature review. And from that, there was evidence to suggest that outdoor and horticultural activities are beneficial for people living with dementia. But a lot of the research was not based in the UK and was based in institutional settings, so nursing homes and care homes. And there's a massive gap of detail about what are these interventions? What do these activities actually look like and run like? So as somebody who wanted to implement their own sort of intervention, it was very difficult to get an idea of the components of those activities from the literature. I spent some time in a care home organisation as well to look at how a structured activity programme where there's a designated member of staff who's responsible for delivering activities operated. And that sort of confirmed my choice of doing it in the community, so that it was the people who didn't necessarily have access to that already structured, tailored programme of activity. Within this phase as well, I then went and interviewed over 20 people who were currently involved in the care and the support and activity provision for people who are living with dementia across a number of settings. So I spoke to physiotherapists and occupational therapists, horticultural therapists and outdoor activity practitioners, just to name a few. This led on then to me approaching a community garden in Birmingham, Martineau Gardens, and we developed a 6-week pilot study of horticultural activities for people who were living with dementia in the community and invited their caregivers, which were, for all of the participants was actually a partner. The findings from that study then led to the development of an intervention study, which again still involved Martineau Gardens, but expanded to not just horticultural activities, but a range of outdoor and nature-based activities, delivered within an independent living village. So people lived in their own homes, but on a site that was accessible to the broader community. So it was taking that step of still enabling a bit of a structured environment in which to deliver the activities. Some of the key findings then so far, because I am still in the analysis phase, is hopefully developing a set of practical recommendations for what can we do practically when delivering and developing an activity programme for people living with dementia in the community. Some key findings around the activities themselves was this familiarity that people had with nature and plants and flowers, and the multi-sensory stimulation that people got from those as well. It was almost a bit of a level playing field, taking somebody into a natural environment where their cognitive deficit and their cognitive ability wasn't a factor. It didn't limit them engaging with that space, which was really good to see. And actually we saw so much reminiscence. So it provoked people's memories, people shared experiences. It touched into that long-term memory that's preserved in dementia for longer. So actually then cognitive ability and memory wasn't a barrier to people engaging. What was really nice about using outdoor and nature-based activities was how adaptable they were to people's individual cognitive and physical abilities and needs. And I was supported by an excellent group of staff at Martineau Gardens and at the Independent Living Village that I worked in, who had wealth of experience at working with people who are living with dementia and providing specific horticultural activities as well. My research has supported the wider research that group-based activity is really beneficial. It offers this opportunity for social interaction, but also this support network. People generally felt comfortable and enjoyed coming along to sessions, and this was really reflected in the feedback from caregivers during the pilot study at how much support and trust they had in us offering that programme. And they actually were able to then leave their loved ones who were living with dementia and go off and do other things that they wanted to do, whether that was going and having a walk and a hot chocolate, or going and doing jobs that were really challenging to do whilst they had their care and responsibilities as well. Again, it contributes to the kind of wealth of research about community-based activities and the role that a community garden could play within Birmingham at supporting people living in the community with dementia. Two of the things I measured in the intervention study were self-reported quality of life and depression. So this was from the participants who were living with dementia and cognitive impairment. And a really promising finding, obviously it's quite a small study in one place, was that quality of life was reported higher after the 12 weeks and symptoms of depression were reported lower after the 12 weeks. And this was reflected to an extent in the level of enjoyment that people displayed and reported throughout individual activities and in the follow-up interviews I did with people afterwards. And I absolutely enjoyed it as well. It wasn't just exclusively the participants. I think all of the staff, volunteers and myself, definitely by far the most enjoyable bit of my PhD. So a little bit about impact then, as well as the findings. So Martineau Gardens was the community garden I've worked with, and since doing the pilot study, successfully applied for 3 years funding to continue working with people who are living with dementia. And we decided, whilst the pilot study was exclusively run for a group, in addition to the other activities that they do, that actually they're going to use the funds to integrate people living with dementia into their existing volunteering group. And that's because actually we need to take a person-centred approach and pay attention to the interests of that individual and not just put them in a group with other people who are living with dementia, but actually focus on what their interests and hobbies are within what Martineau Gardens can offer. A number of the participants from the pilot study have become regular weekly volunteers in various groups already, which has been really good to see. And it's been a great excuse for me to keep popping back to visit and see how everyone is and just enjoy being in a really lovely garden. I've got plans to disseminate the findings both through the traditional academic routes and also to practitioners, and particularly I'm working with the Independent Living Village organisation and their mental health and dementia practitioners to see whether we can incorporate more outdoor and nature-based activities into the programmes that they already offer. As part of the final intervention study, I involved students from occupational therapy and physiotherapy, and they were able to come and volunteer on the project and actually get some continuing professional development and experience slightly different to one that they would get throughout their clinical placement. So actually spending a longer period of time with people who are living with dementia in their own homes and environments, and specifically engaging them in activity. And then future work. So there's obviously a lot of future work that can be done from this study. The findings are really positive, but they're very limited to the environments and the settings in which I conducted them in. So it would be really good to explore what a longer term study would look like on the benefits for people living with dementia, but also to roll it out and maybe explore it in a different kind of setting, adapt it to care home populations. So there's quite a lot that can be done in the future. And I just want to finish by saying something which I finish a few of my lectures with to undergraduate students, is there's actually an enormous value in living and enjoying things in the moment. And even though somebody living with dementia might not remember doing an activity, so much happiness and enjoyment and pleasure can be brought from doing it. So we shouldn't assume that just because people won't remember something, they won't benefit. Thank you.